Thank you all very, very much indeed for coming. We're going to start with a short video, and then I'm going to make some remarks and introduce my colleagues. So we're going to have the video now, I hope.
This Girl Can came out of research we had that showed that there was a huge gender gap in participation between men and women. This Girl Can has empowered women in the UK by, we've really celebrated and shown everyday normal women getting active.
The biggest change I'm seeing is in schools where we're educating children to tackle the seeds of phobic behaviour.
That there were women that I knew, girls that I knew were going through this practice and no one was doing anything to protect them.
Integrate UK is a youth-led charity which aims to raise awareness of gender-based issues such as FGM and violence against women and girls.
My mother has become the first person to be jailed for female genital mutilation in the UK.
What I love so much about working in the NHS is that concept of free healthcare at the point of need.
Plastic pollution is one of the biggest challenges that we are facing. In the UK, we have developed a sustainable packaging made from seaweed and other plant extracts that biodegrades within just a few weeks.
Connecting Classrooms Through Global Learning is a programme devised by the British Council. We're currently learning about how we can build together and make sure that everybody has the opportunity for education and quality education in particular.
Thank you very, very much indeed. Can you hear me clearly through this microphone? Yes? Thank you. We are very, very proud as the United Kingdom to have the opportunity to discuss with our colleagues, to learn from you, and to present our first Voluntary National Review. This has been a wonderful journey for us. We are, of course, as a country, very proud that we continue to spend 0.7% of our GNI on international aid. But of course, the VNR process has brought the spotlight from what we do abroad to what we do at home. It's been a process of learning some things that we've done well and some things where we really haven't done well and where we have much more to learn. So the process of the VNR, and the very large document that I hope some of you have read, shows that in our review, we have, of course, confirmed that we've made some progress. On climate, for example, we have now committed to net zero by 2050, and I look forward to discussing perhaps some of that detail with you. We have achieved remarkable employment figures, some of the best employment figures that we have ever had historically. Over the last 10 years, our education has significantly improved, with more children in good and outstanding schools than ever before. But there are also very significant challenges in development in Britain. In housing, for example, we have 2 million fewer homes than we should have. In relation to food banks, we have serious problems of people accessing food. We have issues of child poverty. And for me particularly, I'm very struck by some of the very significant issues we have and the suffering that we have within our prisons. This process, then, has been a process of learning what we've done well and what we've learned badly. It's been a process of learning also from our devolved administrations for the work that Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales has taken, often better work than we've undertaken in England in providing the data and the structures to drive change. But above all, and it's on this that I want to conclude, for me as an International Development Secretary, it's given me a unique insight into the challenges that developing countries have. For the first time, I understand now, doing it domestically, the challenges that people internationally have, my partners internationally, when they talk about the issues of pushing ahead with health reform or education reform in Nigeria or Myanmar. I can see through the challenges that we have in the United Kingdom in addressing adult social care, the way that we deal with the frail elderly, how much that connects to politics, to resources, to the media, the ways in which the things for which we are criticizing ourselves in the VNR are things for which we are also criticized by the opposition in Parliament, and the way in which we take from this the fundamental lesson that development, whether abroad or at home in the United Kingdom, connects so intimately with issues of money, politics, and power. And above all, therefore, the lesson that we've taken from this is a lesson of humility, that the only wisdom is the wisdom of humility. Humility is endless.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Michelle Giddens from Bridges Fund Management. I would like to speak to you all today as investors, because everyone in this room is an investor through our pensions, through insurance, through our savings. Someone is investing our money on our behalf. Now, I want you to imagine that as an investor, you need to choose between two pension products. If you press the red button, your pension is invested in oil, cigarettes, companies with poor employment practices. If you press the green button, your pension goes into sustainable forestry, clean energy, companies with excellent employee practices. Sounds a pretty simple decision, right? And according to the UK government's Investing in a Better World initiative, it is. 7 in 10 people surveyed want their investments to take into account impact on people and planet. The trouble is, the financial sector that manages that money on our behalf is largely incentivized to invest for short-term financial gain and not long-term sustainable growth. So they keep pressing that red button. Part of the answer is to give them more green button options. In 2002, I co-founded my firm, Bridges. We specialize investments that help build a more inclusive and more sustainable economy, from lower cost housing in cities to wind turbines to better care for the elderly. Investments that make good financial returns while helping to contribute to meeting the global goals. And the good news is that in the last decade, we've seen attitudes shifting. The younger generation are rejecting fast fashion and single-use plastics in favor of reuse and recycling. And they want to work for, invest in, buy from companies that are doing the right thing. UK ethical funds grew 250% just from 2015 to 2018, and large financial institutions are setting up SDG investment funds. The UK has been a global leader in terms of impact investing policy. The newly announced Impact Investing Institute in London is one sign of this, and CDC is at the forefront of impact investing in the poorest countries. The Impact Management Project is working hard to agree on a consensus on impact standards and benchmarks. So we are making progress. But we need to turn this growing trickle of capital into a flood. Because in order to achieve the global goals, we need to unlock trillions of dollars of private sector capital. Now, you in this room as policymakers have the power to decide to implement policies that will catalyze this kind of impact investing. And all of us as investors, because remember we are all investors, let's keep pressure on those that manage our money to keep pressing the green button. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Claire Melamed, and I'm the CEO of the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development Data. I'm here because data is the lifeblood of the SDGs. It's that collective commitment that you've all made to gather and then report data on progress that makes the goals so powerful as an instrument of change. The data which is collected by governments to report progress on the goals it's the raw material for accountability and the backbone of decision making. And we see so clearly in this VNR how data can shine a light on how progress is happening and how it can reveal who is being left behind and show where governments and others need to focus their energy and their attention. But there is a big injustice at the heart of our global data, because those who most need this light, who most need the attention of the world focused on them and their lives, people who are very poor, people who live in countries that are ravaged by conflict, they are the least visible in the data. For too many of them, the light is turned off. We don't know some of the most basic things when people are born or when they die. Millions upon millions of children under 5 who are born in our world are not registered. They're invisible, effectively, to the governments whose responsibility it is to help them. Because how can a government build a road or a school or a hospital for children that it does not know exist? And data delayed is data denied. For too many people, the data that we have lags far behind their lives. We're only seeing them in the rearview mirror. For 2/3 of the population of Africa, the poverty data that we use is based on surveys that were conducted before the SDGs were even agreed. It's difficult to see how we can achieve the SDGs if we're fighting the battles of yesterday and we don't even know about the realities that people are facing today. The UK government has led the way on data innovation, for example, in championing the Inclusive Data Charter and providing resources and technical support to end the injustice of invisibility around the world, and developing its own action plan to shine a light on issues like domestic violence, understanding who is most at risk and pointing the way towards solutions. Data, when it's used well, can help to save lives. The VNRs that we're all considering this week are all built with data, but the foundations are shaky. So I'm asking you all, as you make your plans and your investments to achieve the SDGs by 2030 and keep that promise, to invest in the thing that makes everything else possible, the data which shines a light on progress and can illuminate the darkest corners of our world. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Hawkins and representing youth and civil society on why the UK needs more urgent action on climate change. As we know, we must reach global net zero emissions by 2050 for an even chance of keeping warming within 1.5 degrees. Failing to do so threatens to derail any attempt of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and puts any prospect of ending poverty far out of reach. Young people all over the world have been raising their voices and calling on their governments to set a safer and cleaner future, because my generation will bear the brunt of catastrophic climate impacts if we do not stop adding to the problem and set ourselves on a new path. Last month, the UK government committed to a legally binding target to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This is a really great step forward, and as the first major economy to do so, I welcome the growing number of other countries also committing to this target. But now, we need the policies that actually get us there. We're currently not on track to meet near-term targets. As the country that kick-started the Industrial Revolution and one of the largest contributors to climate change, the UK has a moral duty to go further and faster to reach net zero emissions as soon as possible, without the use of international offsets. This means rapidly phasing out fossil fuels and expanding renewables, decarbonising our homes, moving to electrified transport quicker, planting more trees to remove carbon from the air, And finally, putting our money where our mouths are and ensuring that all investment across the whole of government helps keep us within 1.5 degrees. Even if we reach net zero, we will still face impacts from our warming climate and rising sea levels. This means that we must ramp up adaptation measures to help protect those for whom climate change is already impacting upon their daily lives. All countries must reach net zero. The question is not if, but when. As the Climate Action Summit approaches in September, and as we look forward to 2020, where you'll need a new round of ambitious pledges that go above and beyond what countries have already committed to in the Paris Agreement, countries must show bold leadership to tackle this emergency and set ourselves on a path for a just transition to net zero. The science is clear. We have all we need to end our contribution to climate change, and the time is now to get on with it, because we have to get this right. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very, very much indeed. We're now going to go to the questions from the floor, because this is really about learning from other countries. But I just wanted to reflect very briefly on what we've heard, because it seems to me that the important lesson here is that civil society and partnership doesn't need to be a bland, fluffy, polite type of engagement. What's nice about what I've just heard is the way in which Becca, for example, was actually criticizing the UK government, challenging us on what we were really doing on the move to net zero, the way in which the speech on impact investing really revealed what the private sector can do, which the government cannot do in terms of focus on debt and equity and currency fluctuations, or in relation to data, the really clear illustration that the data revolution needs to be driven by the private sector and then pushed over to government, so that that partnership is about the government setting the regulations and structure to tap that private sector. If we can get that right, then these words like civil society and partnership can be not just platitudes, but real drivers for positive change.
I thank the Secretary of State for International Development of the United Kingdom and his team for their presentation. I now invite delegation to have an interactive dialogue with presenting country, and I would like to appeal to delegation to observe the time limit of 2 minutes. First speaker will be Australia.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Minister, and the civil society representatives on the panel. It was a terrific presentation. Following up a little bit on civil society, or the private sector in particular, in your written VNR, you talk a bit about opportunities to harness innovation in the UK tech sector. Australia is very interested in innovative ways to meet the SDGs. So would be interested to hear a little bit more from you about what the UK is doing to encourage the tech sector to play a role in developing creative solutions, ways to meet the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you, Australia. Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Secretary of State, at the outset, allow me on behalf of the Algerian delegation to congratulate you, together with the delegation which is with you on the podium, for the valuable report that you have presented and in which you have shared with us the priority of UK in the implementation of the SDGs. We commend all the efforts that you are investing in the implementation of SDGs. Thus, you have highlighted in your VNR inequalities as a main challenge of UK, and we would like to know what are going to be your next step in handling this. Thank you, Mr. Secretary of State.
Thank you, Algeria. Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I would like to congratulate the United Kingdom for presenting their first Voluntary National Review. I would like to ask regarding the VNR, what is the UK's experience of delivering the SDGs across the country's different regions and devolved administrations, and what has it learned from the VNR process in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. Iceland.
Thank you, Chair. Let me start by thanking the Minister and the panelists for excellent presentation and also for a very detailed and thorough report. As you are going through the first VNR process, what would be the main lessons learned and what would you have done differently? Thank you.
Thank you, Iceland. Croatia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank for the government of United Kingdom for their report. I would like to ask, we just heard that UK is the first major economy to pass a new law to reduce emission to net zero by 2050, and you have a youth delegate representative speaking about the importance of tackling climate change. Please, could you share a bit more of your approach to climate change as UK Secretary of State? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Croatia. Women's Major Group.
Thank you, Chair. The UK VNR has failed to demonstrate accelerated ambition to implement the SDGs. Without a comprehensive delivery plan, the UK will not be able to tackle the critical gaps in achieving the goals or reverse the policies leading to regression. There is lack of progress in tackling the multiple factors that lead to inequalities. Recent evidence from the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights noted the disproportionate impact of UK austerity policies on the poorest, on women, people with disabilities, children, ethnic minorities, migrants and other marginalised groups. This plan must demonstrate a significantly improved commitment to the UK's human rights obligations. When will the government create a transformative national action plan for achieving the SDGs, which ensures coherence around domestic and international policies, is led by a ministerial department with a cross-government mandate, and takes full account of the UK's human rights obligations? The perspectives of diverse stakeholders are insufficiently reflected in the review, and the voices of the most marginalised are notably absent. The proposed stakeholder engagement mechanism must be meaningful and accountable, involving a range of actors working across domestic and international issues. When will the government provide details on the proposed mechanisms for stakeholder engagement? And specifically, how will this engage marginalised groups and all levels of government? And will it commit to a collaborative national SDG communication strategy and raise awareness and drive progress? The government has not sufficiently involved local government, so critical to the success of the goals, or the British overseas territories. These stakeholders require greater direct support for delivery and for their voices to be properly heard. It must engage with existing good practice, such as the leadership in Scotland and Wales on the SDGs. It must also engage with the recommendation in today's International Development Committee report, which we endorse. How will the government engage?
I'm very sorry. NGO Major Group.
The UK's delivery of the SDGs is undermined by inconsistency of policies at home and abroad, and with its obligations to international human rights and environmental standards. The VNR merely signposts interlinkages rather than exploring implications and solutions. This reflects a lack of policy coherence across government. For example, the UK's investment in global mechanisms that support environmental sustainability is undermined by a lack of action to address domestic mass consumption of products that contribute to environmental degradation. So please detail how will the UK close the gaps in coherence between international and domestic policy, human rights and environmental standards. The UK has not properly aligned its foreign policies with sustainable development. Trade and defence priorities must not violate human rights obligations. For example, arms exports and licensing, especially to countries that violate human rights, must be subject to scrupulous, transparent examination and civil society review to demonstrate continued commitment to achieving SDG 16. So when will the UK government, commit to a comprehensive strategy that aligns sustainable development with trade, investment and decent work, security, peace and human rights? The VNR process has failed to engage governments and stakeholders in partner countries in the Global South. The UK's international approach must respect and be led by national and regional priorities. The UK Government must provide more direct financial and capacity building support to national governments and local civil society beyond data capacity so they can take the lead in their own SDG planning, delivery and monitoring. My final question, when will the UK increase direct support to governments and local civil society in the Global South to achieve the 2030?
I thank you for your questions, and I now invite the Secretary of State for International Development of the United Kingdom to briefly respond to the questions from the floor within 2 minutes.
Within 2 minutes. Okay.
2 minutes.
So I've got 2 minutes to respond to all these points and questions. Let me very quickly see if I can get 10 or 15 seconds from my colleagues. Anybody want to come in? Do you want to come in briefly on any of these issues?
Very briefly, just there was a question about engaging technology, and I just wanted to mention some good experiences in the UK of Tech for Good incubators. And then there was a question around, and I completely agree, the need for government to be coherent and to work together across departments. Just at least one good example is I mentioned the Impact Investing Institute. That is a collaboration between the City of London, the Office of the Inclusive Economy, and DFID. Okay, I'm going to be mean and in the last minute just try to deal with all these different questions that were raised. I think the first thing, just to frame it, is there clearly is a great deal that we need to learn through this process. On the question on inequality raised by Algeria, I would say focusing particularly on some of the most vulnerable and marginalized, in particular categories such as illegal migrants, prisoners, the gypsy traveller community would be examples of communities that have been overlooked traditionally by all types of British government, and moving the conversation on from a binary conversation on equality towards the very poorest and most vulnerable is critical. In relation to the devolved administrations, which was the question that we got from Indonesia, Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland have different reporting frameworks and different well-being frameworks from which we've learnt an enormous amount. But with only 30 seconds to end, I'd like to pay tribute to the civil society organizations for their challenge. I mean, this is the purpose of this. It is extremely important to understand that Britain gets a lot of things wrong. There are many ways that we can improve. It's also important to understand that the answers, of course, to some of these questions is that they go deeply to the structure of the British economy, deeply to the structure of British foreign policy, and if we had longer, there would be many ways of pushing back at some of these critiques, but these critiques are important because they are important for every country. Those same elements of lack of coherence, the same imputations of hypocrisy, could be levelled at almost any member state at the United Nations, and all of us need to work together to think about how the platitudes and statements that we make about the global goals actually relate in practice to our actions on the ground. Thank you all very much indeed.
I thank the Secretary of State for International Development of the United Kingdom and his team for their statement, and also for answering questions. I would like to thank also the delegation for their valuable contribution. With that, we come to the end of the VNR of the United Kingdom.